Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a time that didn't just sleep. Differently, it feared differently. We're heading back to the 1800s, when the sun setting didn't just mean rest, it meant surrender. Because when the light faded, the world turned into something else. You probably won't survive this one unless you're brave enough to keep your candle lit. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. It'll be fun to see which corners of the world are still awake with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The last candle breathes its final sigh beside you, a trembling flame fighting for existence before surrendering to the dark. Its smoke curls upward, thin, gray, and ghost-like, vanishing into the black ceiling above. And suddenly, the room changes. The shadows aren't just shadows anymore. They move differently. They feel like company. In the 1800s, night wasn't decorative, it was devouring. You don't just see it, you enter it. There's no comforting orange streetlight outside. No lead glow bleeding from under your door. There's just absence, the kind that presses on your chest. You step to the window. The glass reflects nothing, only your breathing fog. Beyond it, the street is gone. Not empty, just gone. In the faint moonlight, shapes form and fade. The skeleton of a tree, a fence, something that looks almost human until it moves wrong. Your candle is out. There's no relighting it now. The matches are downstairs. And you'd rather not test your courage on those stairs tonight. Because in this century, the dark isn't just inconvenient. It's alive with stories. They used to say darkness had weight. That's not poetry, it was common belief. The moment the last ember of the hearth died, the night air crept in, bringing with it miasmas deadly. Invisible clouds that could slip into your lungs and end you by morning. People closed shutters not just for warmth but for survival. You breathe shallowly, as if to respect their superstition. You can almost feel it, the stale, heavy air curling under the door, waiting for someone foolish enough to inhale deeply. Outside, a horse's distant snort cuts through the stillness. Someone's carriage perhaps, creaking home from the tavern before midnight hits. Because nobody with sense walks after midnight. Not here, not now. You imagine a young servant in a long wool coat, holding a small lantern, trying to make it back from the baker's with a loaf still warm. The light barely reaches his knees. The rest of him is swallowed whole. Somewhere in the black between gas lamps, there could be anything: a thief, a drunk, or something that doesn't care for bread or money. Scholars still argue whether people truly believed in monsters then, or whether fear itself became the monster. But it's hard to tell the difference when all you have is candlelight and silence. You run your hand along the wooden table, feeling the rough grooves made by years of use. The air is colder now. Your heartbeat is the only sound that dares to move. Even the rats under the floorboards seem to be holding their breath. You remember reading how night once ruled time. In pre-electric cities, the day was chopped into daylight for work and dark hours for retreat. Life was shaped around the flame's endurance. When it burned low, so did courage. The wealthy might afford whale all lamps soft, steady, dignified. But for most, candles were precious currency. One candle could mean warmth or safety or a night lost to blind fear. So they rationed them, just as you ration your courage now. A sudden pop from the fireplace startles you. The faint glow of the dying coals flickers, painting your walls in trembling, reddish ghosts. You could swear one of the shadows just nodded back at you. It's strange, isn't it? The human mind, when robbed of sight, starts creating substitutes. Faces in corners, figures in curtains, stories in stillness. And that's how the night earned its reputation. Not as villain, just as mirror. Every sigh of wind, every loose shutter, every animal cry became a whispered reminder. You are not alone. You never were. Even now, centuries later, with screens glowing and bulbs buzzing, part of you still recognizes that ancient fear. It lives quietly in your instincts, the slight unease when lights go out, the urge to check the hallway twice. You've inherited it like an heirloom. You lean back, close your eyes, and listen. The hum of your own blood echoes like a heartbeat in an empty room. In the 1800s, people heard that and thought it was the devil tapping on their souls. No wonder they feared the night. The candle's last breath lingers as scent rather than light. Burnt wick, sweet wax. You almost miss it, because now, you are fully inside the dark. And somewhere, in the pitch-black silence, a floorboard creaks, not behind you, not beside you, just close enough to remind you. Night, in the 1800s, wasn't passive. It watched back. You exhale slowly. The first step into history is always the hardest, especially when it's made in total darkness. You wait, holding your breath, as the sound fades. It's hard to tell if it was real or Memory, an echo of your imagination, bouncing off the walls. The room feels heavier now, almost like the air thickens with something unsaid. But curiosity wins over fear, doesn't it? You edge closer to the window again, because that's what people always did when the dark seemed to quiet. They looked for life beyond it. And outside, the 19th century street stretches before you like a half-forgotten dream. The cobblestones gleam faintly under a thin veil of moonlight, cracked and slick with evening dew. A lonely gas lamp stands at the corner, flickering like it's unsure whether to keep fighting the wind. The rest of the street, it's swallowed whole. Gaslight was a marvel back then, a modern miracle that promised safety and progress. Yet here's the truth no one said aloud. It made the darkness worse, because now, shadows didn't just exist, they moved. The pools of light were tiny islands in a vast black ocean, and every time you left one, you stepped into the unknown. You pull your coat tighter, or maybe the person you've become in this century-old night does. The hem brushes damp stone. You start walking. The silence hums around you like it's alive, waiting to see where you'll go. From one gas lamp to another, the world flickers in and out of existence. For a heartbeat, you see the outline of a carriage wheel leaning against a wall. Then a cat, or maybe a rat, darting across your path. And behind you, the faint click of a boot heel. You stop. There's no one there. Just the sound of your own pulse in your ears. And the smell, a strange one, coal smoke, horse dung, sweat, and something metallic. The smell of the city's underbelly breathing after dark. In the 1800s, streets weren't places of leisure at night. They were borders between survival and stories you didn't want to star in. Pickpockets hunted in the dimness, their eyes sharp, their blades sharper. Brothels opened their windows, lanterns glowing red like lures in the dark. And in the narrow alleys between brick buildings, where light never reached, real danger lived. Gangs, vagrants, murderers, and sometimes things even the lawmen couldn't describe. Scholars still argue whether the legends that grew from these nights, the faceless men, the whispering drunks, the glowing-eyed hounds, were exaggerations, or desperate attempts to explain fear itself. But history's records agree on one thing. People vanished. You pass a narrow passageway, the devil's entry, locals might have called it. Every town had one, too tight for a carriage, too shadowed for comfort. And you know what's said about places like that? If you entered without light, you might never find the other side. Your boots echo softly. A dog barks somewhere distant. You imagine a London night in 1845, when fog rolled in so thick it felt like liquid darkness, swallowing lamps whole. A man could vanish to steps from his own front door, lost not to monsters, but to the simple blindness of fog and fear. It's strange how cities that shone in daylight became different creatures by night. London, Paris, Vienna, New York, each one had its sleepless side. They weren't built for peace after dusk. They were built for endurance. You pause beneath another lamp. Its flame wavers, stretching shadows like black ropes across the walls. For a second, you could swear you see movement, a shape lingering where the light ends. Not a person, not an animal, just something that waits, knowing you can't name it. This was the curse of the 19th century night. Too much imagination, too little light. People believed the dark could steal your soul through your reflection. That if you looked too long into a window after sunset, your own face might blink back out of sync. Curtains weren't just privacy, they were protection. Against watchers, against the unseen, against yourself. And it wasn't only commoners who feared the streets after sundown. Even the constables, those men meant to patrol, carried lanterns that trembled more than they did. There are records of watchmen refusing to enter certain alleys alone. Bad air, they called it. Unlucky corners. You can almost hear one muttering to himself, "Not tonight, not that way." There's a legend, an odd one, of a Parisian lamplighter who vanished mid-route. His flame was found still burning on the cobblestone, but no trace of the man. They said he'd been claimed by the dark. Rational minds blamed thieves. Superstitious ones blamed something else. Scholars still debate whether the story began as a warning to keep workers safe, or as an unspoken confession that some fears are older than facts. You glance back. The street behind you seems longer than before. The lamps stretch away into infinity, their light dimming like stars at dawn. You wonder how people ever walked these streets, every night without going, mad from their own thoughts. Then you realize something. Maybe they didn't. Maybe madness was just the cost of living in a world that never truly slept. A faint sound draws your attention, soft, rhythmic, close. Footsteps again. This time, they stop when you stop. You turn, fast, but the street is empty. The lamp beside you flickers, the flame stretching, straining, then shrinking. For a moment, it feels like the darkness inhales. You step closer to the light's center, pretending you're safe there. The mind plays games. You remember the stories of night men who followed travelers home, staying just out of reach of lamplight, of whispering voices that repeated your own name from empty corners. And maybe, just maybe, you remember someone once saying, "Never trust the space between two lamps." You breathe out a laugh, quiet but shaky. It's fine. It's only history, only imagination, only. Something rustles behind you. You don't turn. You don't need to, because in this century, no one did. They simply walked faster, head down, pretending not to notice that the street was watching back. You take one more step, and the darkness folds neatly behind you, like it never left. You walk until your ears start ringing with the sound of nothing. No carts, no dogs, no whispers, just stillness that hums, like the world is holding its breath. This is what silence really sounded like in the 1800s, thick, breathing, full of things you didn't want to name. When you finally stop, you realize you've wandered off the cobbled path. The city's edge dissolves into the countryside, where the streets vanish into dirt and the lamps give up entirely. It's darker here, the kind of dark that isn't black, but alive. You can almost feel it touching your skin, cool and damp, like invisible fingers tracing your sleeve. The stillness is so perfect that every little sound becomes exaggerated. Your boots crush a twig, and the noise cracks like thunder. An owl hoots somewhere distant, mechanical, unnerving. You laugh quietly, just to hear a human sound again. But your laughter doesn't come back as an echo. It comes back, delayed. A half second too late, softer, stranger. That's when you remember what people said about rural silence. They believed the night out here was full of spirits, not ghosts in the cinematic sense, but something older, something without faces. Farmers called them listeners, because they didn't speak. They waited. The locals had rules for surviving nights like this. Always whistle before entering the woods. Never answer if you hear your name after sunset. And if you wake at midnight to the sound of tapping at your window, pretend to be asleep. The night respected those who pretended not to notice it. You step further down the dirt path, and the world begins to feel smaller. The trees crowd close. The air smells of wet earth and smoke, maybe from a farmhouse chimney far away. In daylight, this would be peaceful. But under the 19th century moon, peace feels like a lie. Your eyes start to adjust. The pale outlines of branches twist above you like arms reaching for the sky. Somewhere nearby, a fox screams, that shrill, human-sounding cry that can freeze even the boldest heart. You think of the people who lived out here, far from the safety of lamps or neighbors. Their world didn't have the hum of electricity or the glow of distant cities. Once the sun went down, they were trapped inside their own small islands of light, hearths, candles, all lamps, each one a fragile defense against something ancient pressing against the walls. A century ago, that fear wasn't called irrational, it was called common sense. You find a fallen log and sit. The cold seeps through your coat, into your bones. You stare out into the dark and imagine the families tucked in their homes right now. Shutters nailed, doors barred. You can almost hear the soft creak of rocking chairs, the hushed voices telling stories by the fire, not for entertainment, but for endurance. There's one about a woman who heard her dead husband's voice outside, begging her to open the door. She did, of course. They always did. They found her the next morning, smiling, eyes wide open, face frozen like she'd seen the truth too late. Scholars still argue whether these were superstitions born of greed or just clever ways to keep people from wandering into danger. Wolves, thieves, whether the night had 1,000 real predators. Sometimes it was safer to believe in one imaginary one. The wind changes direction, brushing your cheek with a cold breath. You could swear it smells faintly of something sweet, lavender maybe, or rot disguised as it. Your heart gives that tiny panic flutter that happens before your brain decides what you just felt. You tell yourself it's fine. It's just the air shifting. But part of you knows better. The 1800s. Night didn't need to roar or chase you to make its presence known. It whispered. It waited. It filled silence until silence screamed. You listen again. Somewhere out there, water trickles, a stream maybe. Then a faint humming sound. Low, rhythmic, almost like someone singing to themselves. You lean forward, squinting into the dark, but there's nothing. Just shapes of trees and the slow swing of branches. Still, the humming continues. It could be the wind, you tell yourself. Or maybe it's one of those oddities you've read about, the hum. They called it later. A low vibration heard by a few unlucky souls, usually at night. No one ever proved what caused it. Not the pipes, not the earth, not madness. Scholars still argue whether it's psychological or environmental. But in moments like this, you don't care what it is. You just want it to stop. The song fades finally, leaving behind that buzzing silence again. And you realize something: you've been holding your breath this whole time. When you exhale, the air feels heavier, as if the world exhales with you. 100 years ago, people believed silence was dangerous. Too much of it meant something was listening. And when the listeners noticed you listening back, that's when things went wrong. You rise from the log, brushing off your coat, trying to laugh at yourself. Spooked by silence, you mumble. But your voice sounds odd in the stillness, distant, hollow, like it doesn't belong to you anymore. Maybe that's the real trick of the 1800s night. It didn't need monsters to scare you. It just made you realize how small you were, and how big the world still is when it's not pretending to be civilized. You start walking again, careful not to break too many twigs this time. The moon slides behind a cloud, and everything dissolves into black. You stop, just to see if the dark will stop with you. It doesn't. It moves closer. You stumble forward, half guided by instinct, half led by fear, until the first faint orange glow appears in the distance. A farmhouse maybe, or a cottage small, lonely, but lit. You move toward it with the same desperate relief travelers must have felt a century ago when light meant life. As you approach, you realize how tiny that flame truly is. A single oil lamp flickering in a window. The glass distorts its glow, bending it like it's breathing. The light is warm, but the space around it thick, absolute black. You step onto the creaking porch and knock softly. No answer, but you hear it. Faint laughter from inside. Not cruel, not mocking, just tired laughter, human. You ease the door open, and the room greets you like an old photograph. For people sit around a small fireplace, faces bathed in amber light. Shadows crawl behind them, long and liquid. The air smells of smoke, bread, and damp wool. They glance up, but their eyes don't widen. You're not a stranger to them, not really. You're just another soul wandering through the dark. Someone gestures for you to sit. You do. The chair creaks like it remembers every ghost who's ever used it. This is how nights were survived back then, not alone, but together. Families, servants, travelers all gathering by the fire, not just for warmth but for protection. The hearth wasn't just a source of light. It was a border. Everything beyond its glow was unknown territory. The youngest among them, a girl of maybe 10, stares at the fire with wide eyes. Tell the story, she says softly. The father hesitates, glances toward the mother, who gives a small nod. And just like that, it begins the nightly ritual of fear and comfort. The story isn't dramatic. It never is. It's about a man who borrowed fire from a stranger's hearth and forgot to thank them. A simple superstition that spirals into tragedy. His fields withered. His animals vanished. One night, he woke to find a dark shape sitting at the edge of his bed, breathing in rhythm with his own. The girl gasps at the right moments. The fire cracks perfectly on cue. And you realize something subtle. These stories aren't about entertainment. They're about control. When you can't see the world, you invent reasons for why it feels dangerous. The tale gives chaos a name. Scholars still argue whether such fireside folklore kept communities united or just kept them afraid. But maybe those were the same thing. Fear made people stay close. And in a world where distance meant death, closeness was survival. The father's voice trails off, and for a moment, no one speaks. The room listens to itself. You can hear the faint tick of a clock, the low hiss of the lamp wick. The mother adjusts the flame, and shadows leap higher across the walls, shaping into faces that don't belong to anyone here. You blink. They vanish. This was the 1800s version of entertainment imagination, turned tangible by flickering light. The shadows themselves told half the story. People didn't just see shapes. They believed them. The mother catches your eye, smiling faintly. You've traveled far, she says. It isn't a question. You nod anyway. Then you'll know, she adds, stirring the coals, that every night has its own hunger. It's the kind of thing said too casually to be comforting. She leans closer to the flames, her face glowing red like molten copper. My grandmother used to say the dark follows warmth. Wherever there's a fire, something wants to share it. No one laughs. Even the child looks uneasy now. You can hear the faint whistle of wind through the cracks in the wooden frame, like someone whispering secrets to the house itself. You look at the fire, hypnotized. Its dance is both calming and cruel. For every spark born, another dies. You wonder how many nights passed like this, millions of quiet evenings spent fighting in endless war against the dark with only wood, breath, and fear. There's an odd comfort to it, though. The simplicity. You didn't scroll, didn't swipe, didn't escape. You sat with your fear until it felt like company. The father clears his throat, breaking the trance. There's another tale, he says, eyes distant, about shadows that stay even when the fire dies. His tone is half warning, half invitation. The mother shakes her head, quick but gentle. Not tonight, she murmurs. The little girl yawns, curls closer to her blanket. The warmth fades slowly, replaced by the chill of fatigue. Outside, a wolf howls a long, low sound that makes the window tremble slightly. The girl flinches. It's just a wolf, the father assures her, though his eyes flick toward the door. You glance too. The latch quivers slightly, like it's breathing. You want to ask if anyone locks their doors out here, but something stops you. Maybe it's the way their silence feels practiced, like they've already accepted that locks don't really matter. The fire sinks lower, embers glowing like dying stars. You feel the room shrinking as the light fades, the faces around you merging into soft outlines. The shadows stretch again, thinner this time, reaching farther, until they touch the edge of your boot. You could swear it feels warm. This was the heart of the 19th century night, not screams or monsters, but waiting, a collective holding of breath between flame and darkness. The father rises finally, tossing another log onto the fire. It crackles back to life, brave and temporary. The mother smiles, but her voice comes out soft. It's never really quiet, is it? And you realize she's right. Even in silence, there's always something breathing, shifting, watching. The night isn't empty, it's just patient. The family returns to their rhythm. The clock ticks, the wind hums, the dark lingers at the edges, pretending not to care that it's been denied, for now. The family drifts to sleep, one by one. The fire burns low, a quiet sea of red and gold. You stay seated, watching the way the light flickers across their faces, peaceful but alert, as if even in sleep, they're waiting for something. The father snores softly, the girl curls tighter into her blanket, and for the first time, you realize how thin the walls are. You can hear everything: the creak of wood, the wind whistling through cracks, the faraway rumble of a horse cart on a distant road. Every sound becomes personal in a world this quiet. You stand and move toward the window. The moon hides behind a layer of thin clouds, its light silver and uncertain. The night outside looks harmless again until you remember why people feared it. Not just for ghosts or thieves, but for something far more mundane and far deadlier. The dark was the doctor's enemy. In the 1800s, medicine didn't understand infection. Germs were a theory at best, dismissed by many as fantasy. What they did believe in was night, air, they thought. Darkness itself carried disease. That foul smells and unseen vapors. Miasmas rose from graveyards, swamps, and open wounds when the sun went down, infecting anyone foolish enough to breathe deeply. So people closed their windows tight after dusk, hospitals sealed their wards, and doctors armed with little more than candlelight and superstition feared stepping into a sick room at night. You can almost imagine it, a doctor riding through narrow streets, his horse clopping slowly over cobblestone, a black bag of instruments thumping against his leg. Inside that bag, leeches, saws, mercury tonics. He stops before a darkened house, takes a breath, and knocks. The door creaks open. A mother whispers, "He's getting worse." The air inside smells of sweat and sickness. The patient lies still, eyes glassy in the dim light. The doctor lights a single candle. Shadows leap to life across the walls, twisted, uncertain shapes that make it hard to tell which figure is the living one. He works quickly, silently. There's no anesthesia, no sterile gloves, only the sound of labored breathing and dripping wax. Scholars still argue whether the so-called night fevers were really malaria, influenza, or simply coincidence, but in those days, the diagnosis didn't matter. Darkness was part of the disease. You think of how they must have felt, those doctors and midwives, walking from home to home with trembling lanterns, knowing that half their patients wouldn't survive till dawn. The irony is almost cruel. The very people meant to fight death were the ones most afraid of what came with it: the night itself. There's a recorded case from 1821. A doctor in rural England refused to treat a child after sunset, claiming the air had turned poisonous. The family lit candles in every room, trying to hold off the darkness as if it were a living thing. The child died before morning. The doctor arrived at sunrise, declaring the cause night fever. The townsfolk never forgave him, but they still didn't open their windows after dark. It wasn't just illness that spread in the night, it was disappearance. Bodies vanished from graveyards, stolen by resurrectionists. These were men who crept into cemeteries after midnight, digging up the newly buried to sell corpses to medical schools, desperate for anatomy specimens. Imagine waking to find the earth disturbed, a grave gaping open under moonlight. People began sleeping near the dead, keeping watch over loved ones. Even grief became nocturnal work. You glance back at the family sleeping by the fire, and a chill runs through you. Somewhere in another town, another family could be huddled just the same, but guarding not the living, but the recently dead. You wonder how doctors and grave robbers coexisted, both serving a kind of dark necessity. Medicine needed bodies. The night provided them. There's something profoundly human about it, though, this constant dance between ignorance and progress, fear and curiosity. By day, the 19th century worshipped reason and discovery. By night, it still prayed to candles and superstition. You think of the tools they used: scalpels dulled from overuse, stethoscopes made of wood, bottles of laudanum for pain, and vinegar-soaked rags to cleanse the air. And when those failed, they turned to prayer. The Lord's Prayer was as common in a sick room as any medical treatment. You close your eyes and imagine lying in a narrow bed, fever rising, the doctor's candle hovering near your face. You see him watching, waiting to decide whether to stay or go before the night takes him too. You hear the faint tick of a clock, the same one in this farmhouse, marking time between hope and surrender. And then you realize something quietly tragic. For most of human history, darkness and death shared the same schedule. A log cracks loudly in the fire, snapping you back to the room. The girl stirs but doesn't wake. The flame flares, bright for a moment, and in that sudden glow, you think you see movement by the door, small, low to the ground. A rat, maybe. Or maybe just your nerves. You turn back to the window. Outside, mist creeps along the grass, pooling low like smoke. If you were living in this century, you'd close the shutters right now, seal the room, pray the bad air didn't find its way inside. But you don't move. You just watch the mist swirl, fascinated by how something so quiet could cause so much dread. The world feared night because it was unsolvable. You couldn't cure darkness, or dissect it, or trap it in a jar. You could only wait for morning and hope you survived long enough to see it. Behind you, the fire crackles softly, the house sighs in its sleep, and you start to understand how medicine and myth once shared the same pulse. Both were born of fear of what hides between dusk and dawn. You stay by the window a while longer, listening to the hush, breathing carefully, as if not to disturb the century around you. And somewhere far away, a clock begins to chime. Midnight approaches. The clock strikes 12. One slow, deliberate chime after another, echoing through the wooden beams of the house. Each note seems to thicken the air, pressing down on the room, like an invisible hand. Midnight, the hour when even the brave pretend to sleep. You turn from the window and notice movement to shape at the edge of the firelight. The father has stirred awake, though his eyes remain half-lidded, as if some instinct older than thought has nudged him up. He listens, not to you, not to the house, but to the night beyond it. After a moment, he exhales slowly, and whispers, "The watchmen are out." You hear it then, a rhythmic crunch of boots on gravel, the low jingle of metal keys, the faint tap of a staff. The night watchmen, men paid to keep the peace after dark, patrolled towns like fragile guardians between fear and chaos. You open the door quietly and step outside. The cold greets you like a slap, clean and sharp. Down the road, the watchman's lantern swings, sending waves of orange light across the mist. His voice carries faintly, past 12 o'clock, and all's well. The irony of that call wasn't lost on anyone. It was meant to reassure, but it also reminded every sleepless soul that something out there might not be well. You follow the sound at a distance, the gravel crunching beneath your shoes. The watchman's pace is slow but steady. He moves with the air of a man who knows the dark will eat him alive if he stops too long in one place. His coat flaps like wings in the wind, and his hand never leaves the lantern's handle. In the distance, a drunk stumbles out from an alley, muttering to himself, head askew, face red from cheap gin. The watchman approaches him, raises his staff, and speaks in a firm but weary tone. You can't hear the words, but the drunk shrugs, laughs, and vanishes into the dark again. The watchman sighs, adjusts his lantern, and keeps walking. This was nightly life in the cities of the 1800s, ordered by exhaustion. The streets were never truly safe, with little law enforcement and no lights beyond those few trembling gas lamps. The night belonged to thieves, beggars, and worse. You might meet a friend or someone who wanted your wallet, your coat, or your pulse stopped. There's a famous account from London, 1831. A watchman named Samuel Pope claimed he saw a figure in a long white cloak leaping from rooftop to rooftop. Newspapers dubbed it the spring-heeled Jack. Some said it was a man with springs in his boots. Others whispered demon, ghost, or punishment for the city's sins. Scholars still argue if it was hysteria, performance, or something the century wasn't ready to explain. You imagine being that watchman, standing under a dying lamp, staring up at the fog-choked rooftops, convinced that anything could come down from above. Behind you, a door slams somewhere, followed by a woman's scream. Sharp, short, then silence. The watchman freezes. You both do. Then, slowly, he moves toward the sound. You trail behind him, instinct stronger than sense. The scream came from a small house at the corner. Its shutters closed, no light from within. The watchman knocks. City watch. No answer. He knocks again, harder. All's well. Still nothing. Finally, he pushes the door open, lantern high. The light spills into the narrow hall, illuminating dust, furniture, and something overturned, a chair maybe. You lean closer, expecting the worst, but it's empty. The scream was real. The source gone. The watchman lowers his lamp, muttering something that sounds like a prayer. They never stay, he says under his breath, more to himself than to you. Then, louder, as if to prove he's still brave, whine through the shutters. That's all. But you both know it wasn't wind. He leaves a small chalk mark on the door, an old habit among watchmen. To signal a disturbance, and walks on. You follow until he stops under another lamp, wiping his brow. Night makes fools of us, he says, voice low. You hear a cough and think it's murder. You see fog and swear it's a ghost. He looks up at the flickering flame. Still, I'd rather face spirits than men. And that's the truth that most people of the 1800s wouldn't admit. Aloud the nights. Real terror wasn't supernatural. It was human. The darkness gave cover to everything people pretended didn't exist in daylight. Crime, poverty, violence, desire. In London, pickpockets prowled in packs, cutting purse strings with razors small enough to hide under fingernails. In Paris, alleyways became hunting grounds for nightmen, criminals so silent. People believed they appeared from nowhere. Even the police feared certain streets. There are old records listing no-go zones after dusk, where even lawmen wouldn't patrol without at least 3 lanterns and company. You think of those watchmen now, half heroes, half scavengers of sanity, patrolling against the invisible. They walked the same routes every night, marking the same doors, hearing the same noises, pretending the world was manageable when it clearly wasn't. A sudden clang breaks your thoughts, a metal trash lid rolling across the cobblestones. The watchman jumps, spins his lantern toward the noise. A cat darts out, hissing. You both laugh nervously, relief echoing in shaky breaths. The laugh doesn't last long, because as it fades, something else rises, the faint rhythm of footsteps. Not yours, not his. Heavy, deliberate, distant. Approaching. You both turn. The street is empty. Only the fog moves, curling like smoke. The watchman mutters, too many shadows tonight, then turns to leave. Go home, he tells you without looking back. Good folk don't belong out here. He walks away, lantern shrinking into the distance until it's just a trembling dot of orange, swallowed by gray. You stand there a moment longer, feeling the cold settle deeper in your chest. Somewhere behind you, a door opens just enough for a whisper of light to spill out, then shuts again. Quickly, as if the person inside remembered it's safer not to look. You start walking too, following no street in particular. The air smells of coal and fog. The cobblestones glisten like wet mirrors, and somewhere above, church bells toll again, announcing an hour that refuses to pass. You realize something strange. For centuries, night belonged to the watchmen, but it never truly obeyed them. They didn't keep order, they just kept watch. And the night, as always, watched back. You walk alone now, the night thick around you like damp cloth. The fog has weight, it presses against your face, muffles your footsteps, each sound before it travels. The streets twist like veins through the sleeping town, and every turn feels like you're slipping deeper into a body that doesn't want you there. Somewhere, a dog barks once, then goes silent. You pause, waiting for another sound. There isn't one. The city is holding its breath. As you move, a faint flicker of light catches your eye, a single candle in a window high above the street. The flame trembles behind the glass, too weak to illuminate much. You wonder who's still awake at this hour. And then you remember the candle might not be for comfort. It might be for the dead. In many towns of the 1800s, people believed that light guided lost souls, helping them find their way to peace. A candle left burning overnight wasn't just decor, it was protection. For the living, it meant the dead could pass by without envy. For the dead, it meant someone still remembered them. You stop beneath the window and look up. The curtain shifts slightly, as if someone or something is watching. You blink, and it's still again. You tell yourself it's just the wind, but your skin prickles anyway. The fear of night wasn't just fear of darkness, it was fear of being unseen, forgotten. In an era before electricity, night erased you completely. You could vanish between one candle flicker and the next. And yet, the 1800s weren't entirely without light. Cities began installing gas lamps around this time, beautiful in theory, unpredictable in practice. The gas pipes leaked, the lamps hissed, and sometimes exploded without warning. Entire blocks went dark when the pressure failed, and people whispered that it was punishment for lighting what wasn't meant to burn. Scholars still argue whether those first gaslight districts made cities safer or simply more visible targets, because light, as comforting as it seemed, also revealed what many preferred to ignore: the poverty, the disease, the sheer number of people sleeping in doorways. You turn down another street, narrower this time. The lamps here are fewer. Each one hums faintly, an eerie mechanical heartbeat. Between them, the shadows deepen to pitch black. A soft sound breaks the silence, something dragging, slow, heavy. You freeze. The dragging stops too. You glance back. Nothing. You start walking again. Faster this time, heart keeping rhythm with your steps. Then it comes again, closer now. The scrape of something against stone. You spin around, pulse hammering in your throat. The fog swirls, reshaping itself into vague forms, one, maybe two, too far to tell. A rational mind would say it's a horse, a man pulling a cart. But the street is too narrow for carts, and you haven't heard hooves. You decide not to wait for an answer. You walk faster, then faster still, until the drag fades behind you. The next lamp ahead glows like salvation. You stand under it, gasping softly, feeling ridiculous for how hard you're breathing. That's when you notice the sign above the door across from you. The Widow's Rest. It's an inn, barely alive, paint peeling, shutters crooked, one lantern swaying by the entrance. You step inside without thinking. The smell of ale and wood smoke fills your lungs, grounding you. A few patrons sit hunched over mugs, faces half hidden in shadow. The innkeeper, a stout woman with hair tied in a bun, looks up. Out late, are you? She asks, voice gruff but not unkind. Couldn't sleep, you say. She chuckles. Then you're in the right century. You take a seat near the fire. The warmth hits instantly, pulling the tension from your shoulders. A man beside you, older, with eyes that look permanently half awake, leans over. You heard it too, didn't you? He whispers. You blink. Heard what? The dragging. You don't answer. You just stare at him. He nods knowingly. They say it's the night collector. Comes for those who wander after curfew. Picks the ones who forget their prayers. He smiles a little, like it's half a joke, but his hand trembles when he lifts his drink. The innkeeper shoots him a look. Stop scaring guests, Tom. He shrugs. Better scared than missing. She rolls her eyes and goes back to wiping mugs. You sit in silence for a while, listening to the crackle of the fire and the occasional creak of the sign outside. The man eventually falls quiet, lost in his drink. You can't tell if it's the ale talking or if the story's older than both of you, but something about it sticks. The idea that night doesn't just watch, it takes. There's an entry in a parish record from 1847, describing nocturnal vanishings in a small English village. Dozens of people reportedly disappeared over the span of a year, mostly men returning from taverns, their paths ending somewhere between the last lamplight and home. Scholars later blamed river accidents, wolves, even exaggeration, but none of the bodies were ever found. You sit a little straighter, noticing how everyone here avoids looking at the door. It's a superstition, maybe, or a survival instinct, because sometimes even the hinges whisper. Outside, the dragging starts again. Slow. Closer. The inn falls completely silent. No one moves. Even the fire seems to dim. Then, the sound fades, just gone. A few people exhale. The innkeeper mutters a prayer under her breath. The old man finishes his drink in one gulp. You catch his eye. He smiles again, weakly this time. Told you, he says. You don't reply. You're staring at the door now, certain you saw the handle move. It doesn't. The silence returns, thick as ever. The fire cracks once, breaking the spell. Someone laughs nervously, too loud, and the room relaxes all at once. The moment passes, but as you sit there, trying to steady your breathing, one thought keeps circling your mind. You came inside to escape the dark, but in places like this, the dark always finds a way in. The fire burns low again, and the mood in the inn loosens only slightly. Someone starts humming a slow, tuneless thing meant more to fill the silence than entertain. The others sip their drinks, eyes darting toward the door whenever the wind pushes against it. You realize that fear, here, isn't loud. It's a quiet, learned thing. These people don't scream at the dark. They just live around it. They've made peace with unease. You lean closer to the fire, feeling the warmth on your palms. The old man who'd spoken earlier clears his throat. You're not from here, are you? You shake your head. He smirks. Didn't think so. Outsiders always stay up too late. You laugh softly, though it's the kind of laugh that trembles at the edges. I just couldn't sleep. Then don't go looking for stories to fill the time, he says. Here, the night tells its own. He leans back, eyes flickering toward the flames. You ever heard of sleep paralysis? You nod. A few times. People waking up and can't move, right? He nods too. We call it the night hag. She sits on your chest, steals your breath. Happens more often to the lonely ones. Someone nearby makes a warning sign with their fingers. The innkeeper mutters something about bad luck and goes back to stacking mugs. The old man continues, undeterred. You wake up, can't scream, can't breathe. Feels like death's leaning close enough to count your heartbeats. I've had it once. He pauses, rubbing his temple. Never slept with the shutters open again. The candle beside you flickers, and for a moment you swear you feel a weight pressing against your chest, phantom, but real enough to make you swallow hard. Sleep paralysis was known long before doctors gave it a name. In the 1800s, people thought it was a visitation, a punishment for wandering thoughts or guilty souls. In some rural towns, those afflicted were told to sleep with a Bible on their chest to weigh down the witch. Scholars still argue whether the night hag stories were psychological metaphors or collective trauma. But to the people living them, it was simple. Darkness wasn't empty, it was crowded. You glance at the others around the room. The man humming stops. The innkeeper sighs, rubbing her arms as though the temperature has dropped. You ever hear about the devil's hour? She asks suddenly. The old man groans. Don't start that. But she continues anyway. Between 3 and 4 in the morning. That's when it happens. The world gets thin. The body's weakest. Most folks die in their sleep right then. Heart stops, breath slows, and if you're unlucky, she lowers her voice. You wake up, but something else is already in the room. Someone laughs nervously, but it doesn't sound convinced. The fire pops, sending a spray of sparks up the chimney. You can feel the air creeping closer, pressing in around the edges. You check the small clock over the bar, it's nearly 2:30. You sip what's left of your drink, though it's gone lukewarm. So what do people do? You ask quietly. The innkeeper shrugs. Same as always. Pray. Lock the doors. Keep a candle lit till dawn. The old man nods. Light's the only thing that listens. You want to dismiss it all as superstition, but something about the conviction in their voices holds you still. These aren't ghost stories for amusement, they're coping mechanisms for a world that didn't have answers yet. And then it happens. The candle beside you flickers once, twice, then dies. Not sputtering, not fading, just gone. The room plunges into half-darkness. A few padrones mutter curses. The innkeeper hurries to relight it, but her matches refuse to catch. The sound of scratching fills the silence. Strike, 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 and nothing. Then, from upstairs, comes a sound. A slow, deliberate thump. You all freeze. Another thump. Louder, closer. The old man grips the edge of the table. No one's renting that room tonight, he whispers. The innkeeper's face drains of color. Stay put, she murmurs, more to herself than anyone else. She grabs her lantern, its light trembling, and starts toward the stairs. You stand before you even think about it. Want me to? No, she snaps softly. It likes attention. She disappears up the steps, each creak sounding like a scream in waiting. The inn is utterly still. You can hear your own pulse. Then the noise stops. You wait. The fire hisses. The old man closes his eyes and mutters something that sounds halfway between a prayer and a plea. Moments later, the innkeeper returns. Her face is pale, her eyes distant. Just a shutter loose, she says, setting the lantern down. Wine caught it, but her hands are shaking. No one questions her. You sit back down slowly. The candle finally relights on its own, as if deciding the scene had lasted long enough. The room exhales. Conversations start again, awkwardly, but you can't help noticing. The innkeeper never looks toward the stairs again. You glance at the clock. 2:53. 7 minutes till the devil's hour. The air feels thick, alive. You wonder if this is what fear used to feel like, when it was part of everyday life, before electricity, before logic, before the world could flick on a light and chase the shadows away. Back then, all you could do was wait it out. So that's what you do. You stay by the fire, counting the seconds, listening, hoping that the night, this time, will pass quietly. Outside, the dragging starts again, closer, and this time, it doesn't fade. The dragging sound doesn't stop this time. It grows steadier, heavier, metal on stone, slow and deliberate, as if someone's pulling something they don't want to carry but must. The entire inn goes still again, as though every heartbeat is waiting for the next sound. You feel the hair on your arms rise, that primal warning humans never really unlearn it. Someone near the back whispers, he's come down the road. You turn toward the window, the one by the door. The glass is fogged from inside, but a faint orange glow filters through lantern light, swinging back and forth in a rhythm too natural to belong to the watchman. The old man mutters, told you not to stay out late. The innkeeper douses the main lamp. The fire still glows, but low, just enough to make the shadows crawl. No one moves, she says softly. If you look, he'll know you're awake. It sounds like superstition, and yet, no one argues. The dragging grows closer. You imagine it right outside now, the scrape of boots, the metallic rattle, the faint hum of something breathing between steps, the kind of sound that makes the walls seem thinner. Then, the lantern light passes across the window. A streak of orange, then gone. Silence. You wait. Nothing. You let your breath out slowly, realizing you've been holding it for far too long. The innkeeper glances around, her eyes scanning faces to make sure no one's foolish enough to peek. Collector, the old man whispers. She nods once, barely moving her head. The name lingers in the air like smoke. The night collector, the myth that's older than gaslight, older than cities. He was said to walk at the edge of darkness, dragging the chains of those who died in shriven souls not yet forgiven, not yet free. And yet, the 1800s weren't entirely without light. Cities began installing gas lamps around this time, beautiful in theory, unpredictable in practice. The gas pipes leaked, the lamps hissed, and sometimes exploded without warning. Entire blocks went dark when the pressure failed, and people whispered that it was punishment for lighting what wasn't meant to burn. Scholars still argue whether those first gaslight districts made cities safer or simply more visible targets, because light, as comforting as it seemed, also revealed what many preferred to ignore: the poverty, the disease, the sheer number of people sleeping in doorways. You turn down another street, narrower this time. The lamps here are fewer. Each one hums faintly, an eerie mechanical heartbeat. Between them, the shadows deepen to pitch black. A soft sound breaks the silence, something dragging, slow, heavy. You freeze. The dragging stops too. You glance back. Nothing. You start walking again, faster this time, heart keeping rhythm with your steps. Then it comes again, closer now. The scrape of something against stone. You spin around, pulse hammering in your throat. The fog swirls, reshaping itself into vague forms, one, maybe two, too far to tell. A rational mind would say it's a horse, a man pulling a cart. But the street is too narrow for carts, and you haven't heard hooves. You decide not to wait for an answer. You walk faster, then faster still, until the drag fades behind you. The next lamp ahead glows like salvation. You stand under it, gasping softly, feeling ridiculous for how hard you're breathing. That's when you notice the sign above the door across from you. The Widow's Rest. It's an inn, barely alive, paint peeling, shutters crooked, one lantern swaying by the entrance. You step inside without thinking. The smell of ale and wood smoke fills your lungs, grounding you. A few patrons sit hunched over mugs, faces half hidden in shadow. The innkeeper, a stout woman with hair tied in a bun, looks up. Out late, are you? She asks, voice gruff but not unkind. Couldn't sleep, you say. She chuckles. Then you're in the right century. You take a seat near the fire. The warmth hits instantly, pulling the tension from your shoulders. A man beside you, older, with eyes that look permanently half awake, leans over. You heard it too, didn't you? He whispers. You blink. Heard what? The dragging. You don't answer. You just stare at him. He nods knowingly. They say it's the night collector. Comes for those who wander after curfew. Picks the ones who forget their prayers. He smiles a little, like it's half a joke, but his hand trembles when he lifts his drink. The innkeeper shoots him a look. Stop scaring guests, Tom. He shrugs. Better scared than missing. She rolls her eyes and goes back to wiping mugs. You sit in silence for a while, listening to the crackle of the fire and the occasional creak of the sign outside. The man eventually falls quiet, lost in his drink. You can't tell if it's the ale talking or if the story's older than both of you, but something about it sticks. The idea that night doesn't just watch, it takes. There's an entry in a parish record from 1847, describing nocturnal vanishings in a small English village. Dozens of people reportedly disappeared over the span of a year, mostly men returning from taverns, their paths ending somewhere between the last lamplight and home. Scholars later blamed river accidents, wolves, even exaggeration, but none of the bodies were ever found. You sit a little straighter, noticing how everyone here avoids looking at the door. It's a superstition, maybe, or a survival instinct, because sometimes even the hinges whisper. Outside, the dragging starts again. Slow. Closer. The inn falls completely silent. No one moves. Even the fire seems to dim. Then, the sound fades, just gone. A few people exhale. The innkeeper mutters a prayer under her breath. The old man finishes his drink in one gulp. You catch his eye. He smiles again, weakly this time. Told you, he says. You don't reply. You're staring at the door now, certain you saw the handle move. It doesn't. The silence returns, thick as ever. The fire cracks once, breaking the spell. Someone laughs nervously, too loud, and the room relaxes all at once. The moment passes, but as you sit there, trying to steady your breathing, one thought keeps circling your mind. You came inside to escape the dark, but in places like this, the dark always finds a way in. The fire burns low again, and the mood in the inn loosens only slightly. Someone starts humming a slow, tuneless thing meant more to fill the silence than entertain. The others sip their drinks, eyes darting toward the door whenever the wind pushes against it. You realize that fear, here, isn't loud. It's a quiet, learned thing. These people don't scream at the dark, they just live around it. They've made peace with unease. You lean closer to the fire, feeling the warmth on your palms. The old man who'd spoken earlier clears his throat. You're not from here, are you? You shake your head. He smirks. Didn't think so? Outsiders always stay up too late. You laugh softly, though it's the kind of laugh that trembles at the edges. I just couldn't sleep. Then don't go looking for stories to fill the time, he says. Here, the night tells its own. He leans back, eyes flickering toward the flames. You ever heard of sleep paralysis? You nod. A few times. People waking up and can't move, right? He nods too. We call it the night hag. She sits on your chest, steals your breath. Happens more often to the lonely ones. Someone nearby makes a warning sign with their fingers. The innkeeper mutters something about bad luck and goes back to stacking mugs. The old man continues, undeterred. You wake up, can't scream, can't breathe. Feels like death's leaning close enough to count your heartbeats. I've had it once. He pauses, rubbing his temple. Never slept with the shutters open again. The candle beside you flickers, and for a moment you swear you feel a weight pressing against your chest phantom, but real enough to make you swallow hard. Sleep paralysis was known long before doctors gave it a name. In the 1800s, people thought it was a visitation, a punishment for wandering thoughts or guilty souls. In some rural towns, those afflicted were told to sleep with a Bible on their chest to weigh down the witch. Scholars still argue whether the night hag stories were psychological metaphors or collective trauma. But to the people living them, it was simple. Darkness wasn't empty, it was crowded. You glance at the others around the room. The man humming stops. The innkeeper sighs, rubbing her arms as though the temperature has dropped. You ever hear about the devil's hour? She asks suddenly. The old man groans. Don't start that. But she continues anyway. Between 3 and 4 in the morning. That's when it happens. The world gets thin. The body's weakest. Most folks die in their sleep right then. Heart stops. Breath slows. And if you're unlucky, she lowers her voice. You wake up, but something else is already in the room. Someone laughs nervously, but it doesn't sound convinced. The fire pops, sending a spray of sparks up the chimney. You can feel the air creeping closer, pressing in around the edges. You check the small clock over the bar, it's nearly 2:30. You sip what's left of your drink, though it's gone lukewarm. So what do people do? You ask quietly. The innkeeper shrugs. Same as always. Pray. Lock the doors. Keep a candle lit till dawn. The old man nods. Light's the only thing that listens. You want to dismiss it all as superstition, but something about the conviction in their voices holds you still. These aren't ghost stories for amusement, they're coping mechanisms for a world that didn't have answers yet. And then it happens. The candle beside you flickers once, twice, then dies. Not sputtering, not fading, just gone. The room plunges into half-darkness. A few padrones mutter curses. The innkeeper hurries to relight it, but her matches refuse to catch. The sound of scratching fills the silence. Strike, 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 and nothing. Then, from upstairs, comes a sound. A slow, deliberate thump. You all freeze. Another thump. Louder. Closer. The old man grips the edge of the table. No one's renting that room tonight, he whispers. The innkeeper's face drains of color. Stay put, she murmurs, more to herself than anyone else. She grabs her lantern, its light trembling, and starts toward the stairs. You stand before you even think about it. Want me to? No, she snaps softly. It likes attention. You're a healer, you ask. He nods once. Was. People used to come by after dark, afraid of fevers and curses. Now they don't come at all. Why not? He shrugs. Too scared to walk at night. You sit. The floor creaks beneath your boots. Tell me, you say. What's out there that keeps them away? The old man chuckles, a dry sound. Depends on who you ask. Some say thieves. Some say wolves. Others, well, they talk about the traveler's terror. You lean in. What's that? He eyes you carefully, as if measuring how much truth you can handle. They say the road itself remembers. Every soul who died lost or wandering, every cart that never reached its town becomes part of it. The road keeps their steps, their breath, their fear. You might not see them, but they'll walk beside you if you listen. You swallow. You've heard them. Once, he whispers, long ago, thought it was the wind. But the wind doesn't whisper names. You sit in silence for a while. The fire crackles, throwing orange patterns on the walls. Then you ask, why stay here, if it's that dangerous? He smiles faintly. Because danger and company are the same thing. I'd rather share the night than fear it alone. His words linger as you step back outside. The cold feels sharper now, the moon low and veiled by cloud. Somewhere down the road, a fox yips short, human-like, eerie. You keep walking. The path grows narrower, swallowed by woods. The trees knit overhead, blocking out what little light remains. Your lantern flickers. And then, without warning, you hear wheels. They're close, rattling, squeaking, urgent. You turn toward the sound, but see nothing. Just the pale road and the shifting mist. The noise swells, thunderous, as if an entire carriage is racing toward you. Instinctively, you step off the path. The air explodes in motion, cold, loud, blinding, and something rushes past, unseen but there. The smell of iron and wet soil follows, the kind that clings to graveyards. Then silence. You stand, heart hammering. The road is empty again. Maybe it's the echo of an old journey, repeating itself. Maybe your mind is filling the gaps your lantern can't, but your skin prickles. Your breath shallow. The old man's words return. The road remembers. You start moving faster. Each step feels heavier. The mist thickens like smoke, blurring the trees. You hear faint murmurs, snatches of conversation. Laughter. The creak of wheels again. You turn, nothing. Scholars still argue whether auditory hauntings reported by travelers of that era were psychological or environmental pressure shifts, sound refraction in cold air, but to those who heard them, explanations didn't matter. Fear had its own logic. By the time you reach the bridge, you're nearly running. The boards groan beneath your boots, and for a second, you imagine hands reaching from the river below, pale and dripping. You push the thought away, fix your eyes on the lantern glow ahead. When you reach the door, the innkeeper is waiting. No surprise in her eyes this time, only quiet recognition. I told you, she says softly. The dark has its ways. You hand her the lantern. I think I saw the road, remembering. She nods. Then it remembered you too. You both stand there, listening as the wind carries a faint sound of wheel. A step, a sigh before fading into the night. And in that moment, you finally grasp what the people of the 1800s knew so well. Night isn't empty. It's crowded, with memory, loss, and echoes of the living. You turn toward the fire, sit down, and let exhaustion wrap around you like smoke. The candle's flame trembles. Outside, the unseen travelers continue their endless march. And you, for the first time, no longer fear them. Morning doesn't so much arrive as it cautiously peeks through the curtains. The light feels pale and reluctant, as though even the sun has learned to tread softly here. You wake in your chair by the hearth, joints stiff, the smell of cold ash filling the air. The inn is quiet to quiet. No sound of boots on the floorboards, no clatter of pots. You rise, push open the door, and find the world outside heavy with dew. The sky is a washed-out gray, the kind that never promises much. For a while, you just walk. The road stretches, empty but familiar, and your thoughts drift to what the innkeeper said last night. The dark has its ways. Maybe she's right. Maybe it does. But not everyone fears the dark. Some people try to understand it. You remember reading once about a group of 19th century scientists, natural philosophers. They called themselves who believed that fear was merely ignorance in disguise. So they set out to study the shadows, literally. They dissected darkness like it was a specimen, built new devices, photometers, lanterns, luminous chambers. They wanted to measure the night, to pin it down with numbers and logic. You imagine one of them now, a thin man in spectacles, hunched over a candlelit desk, sketching patterns of flame. The candle flickers, his quill scratches, and he mutters to himself, how far does darkness travel when no one is watching? Even then, science and superstition coexisted in a strange truce. People read about electricity in newspapers, yet still nailed horseshoes above their doors. Doctors warned of night air causing cholera, while physicists began experimenting with controlled electric arcs. Progress was real but uneven. You reach the town square and spot a small building at the edge of workshop, its chimney exhaling lazy curls of smoke. Inside, you find a man tinkering with something that hums faintly. He looks up, startled but curious. Traveler, you nod. Heard you're a man of science. He grins, wiping soot from his hands. That's generous. I'm more of a man of fire. But come in. The place smells like oil and copper. On the table lies an early gas lamp, half disassembled, surrounded by tools that look more improvised than precise. You're trying to light the night, you say. He chuckles. Someone has to. Darkness wastes too many hours. You glance at the mess of wires and glass. Does it work? Sometimes. He picks up a metal valve, twists it between his fingers. When it doesn't explode, you both laugh softly, though there's tension behind it. You sense how fragile innovation feels in this time, half miracle, half gamble. He gestures toward the wall where a map is pinned. Tiny dots mark cities: Paris, London, New York. They're bringing gaslights to the streets, he says. Imagine that, midnight as bright as noon. You smile. And people won't fear the dark anymore. He pauses, the grin fading. Oh, they'll still fear it. Just differently. You tilt your head. How so? When you take away what people can't see, he says, you also take away what they imagine. The world gets smaller. Safer. Yes, but smaller. You think about that for a moment. It's strange how progress can be both a comfort and a theft. Outside, a cart rolls by carrying barrels of gas and a cluster of curious children following behind, whispering. One of them turns and waves shyly at you, her face smudged with soot. For her, the night might soon be a thing of stories, not fear. You turn back to the inventor. You're changing everything, you know. He sighs. Maybe, but I wonder if we're ready for what we'll lose. There's a quiet melancholy in his voice. You realize that even those who built the future sometimes miss the mystery of what came before. As you leave the workshop, the world seems brighter, not because of sunlight, but because of the idea that people were starting to push back against the dark. Still, something in you feels uneasy. You walk past the square again. A man reads the morning paper aloud to a small crowd. His voice carries the news like a sermon. London celebrates new gas lamps on the Strand. Streets illuminated. Crime rates expected to fall. The listeners murmur approval. But you notice one old woman cross herself quietly. She whispers, "You can light the street, but not what walks beside it." You walk on. The path takes you through the edge of town to an open field. The grass glimmers with frost, catching what little light escapes the clouded sky. You stop and breathe, and for a moment, everything feels suspended between worlds past and present, shadow and flame. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistles low, mournful, modern. Scholars still argue whether technology truly diminished human fear or simply transformed it. Gaslight may have chased away shadows, but it also revealed what had always been hiding within them: our fascination with control, our discomfort with mystery. You wonder what it must have felt like that first night when gas lamps were lit. Across the city, people stepping out of their homes, blinking in disbelief, marveling at how the world glowed without a trace of the sun. No more stumbling in the dark, no more whispers of ghosts, but perhaps, also, no more awe. The evening begins to fall again, but this time it feels different. The fear is softer, muted by human invention. The shadows retreat, not completely, but enough to remind you that progress is only ever partial. You turn back toward the inn, watching as the first lamps are lit, one by one, along the street. Each flame pushes the dark a little farther away, and for the first time, you understand the truth of the 1800s. Fear wasn't conquered by courage, it was replaced by curiosity. The night didn't die. It simply learned to wear light as a disguise. You return to the inn just as the lamps along the road flickered to life, one after another, like a slow, glowing heartbeat. Each one hums faintly as gas hisses through the pipes beneath the cobblestone. For the first time in centuries, the night seems to step back reluctantly, but respectfully. The innkeeper greets you with a knowing smile. "You've seen it, then," she says. "The gaslight." She nods. "Strange, isn't it? Feels like daytime trying to pretend it's not bedtime." You laugh softly. "Maybe that's progress." She gestures to the window. "Or maybe it's vanity. Either way, it's louder than the dark ever was." You both stand for a while, watching the street outside. The light spills across the cobblestones, gold and steady. Shadows still exist, but they're sharper now, less forgiving. You realize that the night hasn't vanished. It's just been edited. Over dinner, you overhear travelers at the next table. One brags about walking through the city at midnight without fear. Another complains that the lights never go out, making it hard to sleep. A third mutters, "They say the gas leaks poison, turns your dreams black." It's funny, you think. Humanity banished one kind of fear only to invite another. After the plates are cleared, you step outside again. The air smells faintly metallic, the scent of burning gas mixed with damp stone. The lamplighter moves methodically down the street, long pole in hand, touching flame to glass. Each ignition flares briefly, then settles into its soft, steady glow. You fall into step beside him. "Must be nice," you say, "lighting up the night like this." He chuckles, not looking up. "Nice, sure, but lonely work. Once I finish, the town doesn't need me until sundown again." "You're the one who ends the darkness," you say. He pauses mid-stride. No one ends it, he murmurs. We just buy time. The words hang in the air as he moves on, the hiss of the flame fading into distance. You wander toward the river. The water glows faintly, reflecting the new lights along its edge. It's beautiful in a strange, artificial way, like a dream that doesn't belong to nature. You imagine what this must have felt like to someone in 1820, seeing the first street lamp flare alive. Ah, maybe, or disbelief, or perhaps a quiet mourning for something they couldn't name. History records that when gaslighting first arrived in London, people gathered by the thousands to watch. Newspapers called it a triumph of civilization, but diaries from that same night tell another story of sleeplessness, headaches, and eyes that ached from too much brightness. Scholars still argue whether those accounts were medical or psychological, but the conclusion always circles back to one truth. The human body wasn't made for eternal daylight. You find a bench overlooking the water and sit. Across the river, the city hums machines, carts, the low chatter of life refusing to rest. The night used to be a pause. Now it's just another shift. An old man sits beside you, clutching a small paper lantern. Too bright for your liking, he asks. You smile faintly. Maybe I just miss the dark. He nods, eyes crinkling. You're not alone. Used to be, night made us humble. We prayed before bed, not because we were good but because we were scared. Now, you ask. Now, he says, we pray for quiet. You both sit in silence. The light ripples across the water, perfect and unbroken. A dog barks somewhere in the distance, and a train rumbles faintly beyond the hills. The world keeps moving. You glance up at the nearest lamp. Do you ever wonder, you say, what the night thinks of all this? The old man smiles. It's patient. It knows we can't keep the lights on forever. You look at him then, but the bench beside you is empty. The paper lantern flickers once, twice, then fades. You stay there for a long time, listening to the river, feeling both comforted and uneasy. It occurs to you that this is what progress feels like: warm, dazzling, and just a little bit haunted. Back at the inn, the hearth burns low. The innkeeper is already asleep, her chair empty. You pour yourself a drink, sit by the window, and watch as the lamps outside burn against the fog. It's beautiful, but in a way that feels forced, like a smile held too long. You close your eyes and think of all the centuries before this one, when night meant surrender. When every creak was a prayer, every candle a heartbeat. You realize how long humanity has been wrestling with the same thing. Not the dark itself, but what it awakens in us. Tonight, though, it's different. The fear has dimmed, but not disappeared. It lingers at the edges, watching from where the light can't reach. You take a slow breath and whisper, almost as a toast, here's to the dark. May it never forgive us completely. The flame in the lamp trembles as if it heard you, then steadies, and somewhere beyond the reach of human invention, the night waits quiet, patient, unblinking. The next evening, you wake to a peculiar silence. The lamps outside still burn, but the world feels hollow, like the night has retreated too far, leaving everything unnaturally still. Even the crickets have stopped singing. You walk to the window. The fog has rolled in again, thicker than before, swirling in slow eddies around the glow of the lamps. It's almost beautiful, like the world is caught between two states. Not dark, not light, just suspended. You step outside, boots sinking into damp earth. The air feels heavy, almost electrical. The lamps flicker faintly, as though the night is pressing back, testing the boundaries of this new invention. Down the road, the lamplighter stands motionless, staring at a broken post where one flame has gone out. You approach, but he doesn't move. His face is pale in the half-light. Gas lines leaking, he says softly. Or maybe the dark's just tired of pretending. He walks away without another word, his long shadow stretching unnaturally far behind him. You look up and realize something unsettling. The sky itself looks dimmer than it used to. You can't see the stars. The new lights drown them out. The thought sinks in slowly. The more light humans made, the less of the universe they could see. You wander down the empty street, past windows glowing faintly with the same yellow hue. Families read by lamplight, children play after sunset, and the night that once frightened entire generations now sits outside, locked behind glass. But not everyone is comfortable with this new brightness. You overhear whispers from an alleyway to women talking in hushed tones. They say too much light drives people mad, one says. Steals their dreams, her companion scoffs. Or maybe it just shows them too much. You keep walking, their words echoing in your mind. There's truth in both, perhaps. Fear of darkness was never about what was unseen, it was about what the mind filled in. Now that the shadows are gone, the imagination has nowhere to hide. You stop by the river again, watching reflections dance across the surface. The lights make everything shimmer, but it's not the kind of beauty that feels alive. It's sterile, controlled. The stars above are faint ghosts, compared to the glow below. You sit on the same bench as before, though the old man doesn't return tonight. His absence feels deliberate, like even he knows this part of the story doesn't belong to him. You take out a small notebook you've been carrying, half curiosity, half habit, and begin to jot down what you've seen. People once feared the night because it revealed their smallness. Now they fear light because it shows them everything too clearly. It's not poetry, but it feels right. Scholars still argue whether industrialization truly liberated people or merely traded one master for another. The 19th century was a time when fear evolved from monsters and spirits to deadlines and machines. Humanity didn't overcome darkness, it just redefined it. You look around, the gas lamps hiss, the windows glow, a few moths beat themselves senseless against the glass. Everything that once belonged to the night dreams. Stars, silence feels distant. A sudden breeze rattles the lampposts, making the flames flutter wildly. You hear a sound, a low hum that doesn't belong to the wind. It's faint at first, then grows into a chorus of whispers, as if the night itself is murmuring beneath the light. You turn slowly. The fog thickens again, swallowing the far end of the street. The lamps there dim one by one, as though something invisible is passing through, exhaling softly against each flame. You should feel afraid, but you don't. Instead, you feel something closer to sorrow. You realize then that the dark was never truly evil. It was just honest. It didn't hide the world, it held it, wrapped it in stillness, gave it space to breathe. The night was mystery, not menace, and in banishing it, humanity might have exiled a part of itself. You think of all those centuries when people feared the night, huddling by the fire, whispering stories to keep courage alive. They weren't just protecting themselves from danger, they were creating meaning. Fear gave shape to faith, shadows gave depth to imagination. But now, under the constant glow, there are no stories left to tell, only schedules, only noise. You whisper to the air, what did we lose when we turned the night into day? The fog curls closer, as if trying to answer. The lamps tremble, their halos shrinking. And for a heartbeat, you see it, the true night, vast and infinite, pressing its face against the thin glass walls of the modern world. Then the moment passes, the light steadies, the hum fades. You sit there a while longer, watching as the fog drifts away and the city resumes its mechanical rhythm. The lamplighter returns, checking valves, muttering to himself. The order of progress is restored, but you can't shake the feeling that something slipped away. Unnoticed something, essential, ancient, maybe even sacred. You rise from the bench and start back toward the inn, passing through the glow one last time. Each lamp you walk beneath feels like a confession, whispered to the stars you can no longer see. And you wonder if, one day, humanity will turn off the lights, not out of necessity, but longing to remember what the night used to feel like. The night is warmer than before, but it feels colder somehow, emptier, like a song with too many notes and no silence between them. The lamps outside the inn hum faintly, steady and bright, as if trying too hard to convince the world that they've won. You step out once more, one last walk before sleep. Though sleep feels like an idea from another time. The road stretches ahead, slick with dew, its glow reflecting in puddles like melted gold. For a moment, you almost forget what real darkness looks like. The air carries a new kind of quiet now, not the thick, alive hush of an old night, but a mechanical stillness. You can hear every distant sound, a train far away, a cartwheel squeaking, a dog barking at nothing. It's all clear, exposed, dissected by light. As you wander, you find yourself at the edge of the village, where the lamps stop. The last one sputters weakly, its flame shivering in the breeze. Beyond it, the old road begins, the one that led to fog and whispers and forgotten names. You stand at the border between centuries. Behind you, civilization glows like a boast. Ahead, the darkness waits with open arms. You lift your lantern, but the glass feels heavier tonight. The flame inside dances, eager, curious. You take a step forward. The sound of your boots on the dirt echoes louder than you expect. The darkness beyond feels different now, not threatening, not inviting, just real. A vast, unmeasured space. It breathes with you. You can almost hear your heartbeat sensing with it. There's peace here, but also sadness. You realize that for all its fears, the 1800s had something we've lost, intimacy with the unknown. They felt the night. They spoke to it, prayed to it, blamed it, respected it. We only try to escape it. You close your eyes, imagining what it must have been like, the world asleep, every sound magnified, every shadow sacred. Families gathered around firelight, the smell of tallow and smoke clinging to the air, the sky vast and black, full of invisible stars and ancient patience. A historical fact drifts to mind. When electricity first illuminated New York in 1882, People stayed awake for days just to stare at it. Scholars still argue whether that moment marked enlightenment or exhaustion, the dawn of progress or the dusk of wonder. You open your eyes again. The old road looks different now. No figures move in the fog. No distant wheels creak. The collector, the healer, the innkeeper's trembling hands, all feel like memories of a dream that didn't end, just dimmed. You walk a few more steps into the dark. The light behind you shrinks. Your lantern flickers, sputters once, then steadies again. And in that moment, you understand what the people of the 1800s feared most. Not monsters, not spirits, but disappearance. The feeling that night could swallow you whole, and the world would simply continue without noticing. Now, the fear is different. It's the fear of never being swallowed at all, of being seen, constantly, forever lit, never lost. You lower your lantern, letting its circle of light shrink. The darkness thickens, gentle and complete. It doesn't feel cruel. It feels like rest. For a long time, you just stand there, breathing with the night. You think of the innkeeper, the lamplighter, the farmer, each trying to survive the same hours in their own fragile way. Maybe that's what night always was, a mirror. It showed people who they really were when no one was watching. The wind stirs the trees. The fog curls low around your ankles. The faint hiss of gas from the last lamp fades into distance. Everything feels right again. You take one slow breath and whisper into the air. I understand now. The dark never hunted us. It only waited for us to listen. And maybe, just maybe, it listens back. You turn, walking toward the village lights again. The lamps seem smaller now, like fragile stars trapped in glass. Their glow no longer feels triumphant, only temporary. You know they'll burn out someday, and when they do, the night will still be here, waiting, patient, eternal. When you reach the inn, the fire has died, but the chair by the hearth still feels warm. You sit, close your eyes, and let your breathing slow until the last traces of the modern world fade. Outside, the gaslight hums. Beyond it, the true night watches with quiet affection. And finally, for the first time since you began this journey, you feel safe. Not because the dark is gone, but because you've made peace with it. So here you are, back in your own century again. Maybe your lamp is in lead, not a flame. Maybe the glow of your phone is the only firelight you know. But some things never change. The night is still there, outside your window. Behind your screen, quiet, endless, curious. It no longer carries wolves or highwaymen, no ghosts tapping at shutters. But it still holds space for the same small truth the 1800s knew. That fear and wonder are twins. And both are born in darkness. Tonight, as you lie in bed, remember that you carry centuries of survival in your pulse. Every heartbeat is a candle. Every exhale a whisper of all those who faced the dark before you. Let their courage live in your quiet. Let their stories hum in the air between your breaths. You don't need to fight the night. Just listen to it. It's softer than you remember, older than any fear, and always patient. So, close your eyes. Let the light fade. The world is still here. The dark is still listening. And if you hear a faint knock at the window or a creak in the floorboards, don't worry. It's just history, settling down beside you for a moment. Sleep well, traveler. End of script. Sweet dreams.